Keanu Reeves, one of the most loved actors in the world, is known for being humble and strong in a quiet way. But during a special interview about voices that inspire the world, he shared something surprising. He said, "There was a man who saved me and I never got the chance to thank him." He was talking about his high school teacher, someone who believed in him when no one else did. This teacher saw something special in him even before Keanu saw it in himself. But what Keanu didn't know was that this teacher was sitting in the studio, listening to him speak from the last row. What happened next was full of emotion, thankfulness, and a secret that had been kept for many years. Before we go on, the host asked the audience, "Where are you watching from? We love reading your comments." Everyone in the audience was quiet, waiting for the next part of the story. The audience was silent. The air felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for something important to happen. The lights in the studio were turned down a little, making it feel more like a calm living room than a big TV set. The host shuffled some papers and looked toward the entrance. A moment later, the door opened softly and Keanu Reeves walked in. He walked slowly, wearing dark jeans, a black t-shirt, and a simple blazer. His hair was a little messy and he had a small beard. His eyes seemed to look beyond the camera, like he was thinking about something deep. The audience gave him a warm, respectful round of applause, like they were welcoming someone who felt like a real person, not just a movie star. Keanu waved with a small smile and sat down on the couch. The host, who had a calm voice and thoughtful eyes, began the interview. "Keanu, first of all, thank you for being here. You are one of the voices that inspire the world. How does it feel to carry that?" Keanu smiled, looking a little shy. "I don't think about it much," he said. "I just try to keep moving forward, one step at a time." The first questions were easy, asking about funny stories from movies, behind-the-scenes moments from The Matrix, and his friendships with co-stars. Keanu answered with his usual kindness, always giving praise to others. But as the interview went on, the mood in the studio started to change. The host put away one of his folders and leaned in a little, looking closely at Keanu. "Today we also want to talk about something different," the host said. "We want to talk about the people who shaped you, the ones who made a difference before you became famous." Keanu's shoulders dropped slightly and he looked down at the floor. The room became completely still. It was the kind of silence that made time feel like it had stopped. Finally, Keanu spoke in a quiet, deep voice. "There's someone," he said. "A man I haven't seen in many years. My high school teacher." The host stayed silent, letting Keanu continue. "He didn't just teach me literature," Keanu said. "He taught me how to survive when I felt like giving up." The audience listened closely, holding their breath. Keanu looked at the floor and then looked up, like he was searching for a memory that was far away. "I remember something he told me one day when I just wanted to disappear. He said, 'You don't have to be perfect to be important.'" The words filled the studio like a soft chant. Some people in the audience started to cry quietly. "That saved me," Keanu said. "It really did." He paused for a moment and his voice grew even softer. "But I never got the chance to thank him." The host didn't know what to say. There was nothing more to add. The story had taken over the room. After a long pause, the host asked, "Do you remember what he was like, this teacher?" Keanu's face softened with affection. "He was tall and thin, always with books under his arm," Keanu said. "He had a quiet laugh and he had a way of making you feel like you weren't crazy, even when everyone else ignored you." Keanu paused for a moment. "I was a confused teenager. My dad was gone. My sister was getting sick and I thought I was stupid and worthless. I had dyslexia and the other kids laughed at me. But he gave me the lead role in a school play. He believed in me even when I didn't know what that meant." The host nodded. "Sounds like he saw something in you before you could see it in yourself." Keanu nodded slightly. "He looked at me like someone who sees a warrior before the armor is even built." The audience was moved. Some wiped away tears and others held their hands tightly in their laps. The host paused for a moment. Then he picked up a piece of paper from his desk and looked at it quietly. "Keanu, before we continue, there's something you should know," the host said. Keanu looked at him with interest, feeling emotional. The host turned slightly toward the audience. "What Keanu doesn't know is that this teacher is sitting in the last row of the studio today. And he's about to do something that the whole world will never forget." The lights in the back row of the studio suddenly lit up. A figure appeared, though still hard to see clearly. Keanu turned toward the back row, his eyes wide open. It was like something deep inside him recognized the figure, even though his mind couldn't understand what was happening yet. The studio was completely quiet. The silence from before felt like it was still hanging in the air. Keanu's eyes stayed locked on the shadowy figure in the back row. There was no name, no confirmation, just the feeling of a presence that tugged at something deep inside his memory. The host didn't rush. He gave Keanu time to breathe and gather himself. Then, gently, he asked, "Keanu, can you take us back to that time before the roles, before the cameras? Who were you really?" Keanu's eyes looked down and his fingers started to fidget. "I was a pretty broken kid," he said. "My dad was gone. My mom was trying her best, but we moved around a lot. My sister was getting sick. We didn't know what it was at first, but we kept going to the hospital. And me? I was just trying to stay invisible." The audience stayed quiet, listening closely. "I had trouble reading because of dyslexia. The words didn't stay still on the page. They jumped around and made fun of me. I failed my classes and the other kids teased me. Teachers didn't know what to do with me. Some of them gave up. Most just ignored me." Keanu looked up, his eyes heavy with old memories. "Except one." The host nodded, understanding the change in Keanu's voice. "Tell us about him." Keanu took a deep breath. "He taught literature," Keanu said. "But that's not really what he taught me. He taught me patience, presence, and how to look at life differently. He looked at me like I wasn't broken, just not ready to unfold yet." Keanu paused like he was finding the right words. "One day after class I was sitting alone. I had read out loud in front of the class and I stuttered. Everyone laughed at me. I felt ashamed. But he came over and said something that stayed with me forever. He walked over and sat down next to me. It was quiet for a moment, then Keanu's voice got soft, almost a whisper. You don't have to be perfect to be important." Some people in the audience wiped away tears. The host didn't say anything, letting the quiet moment last. It was the first time someone had seen value in me, not because I was good at something but just because I was there. That made everything feel different. The host finally asked, "Is that when you started acting?" Keanu nodded. "He gave me a lead role in a school play. It didn't make sense. I was too nervous to speak in front of people. The other kids laughed, but the teacher said, 'This part isn't about acting. It's about being there, and you have that.'" Keanu shook his head like he couldn't believe it. "He believed in something in me that I didn't even see myself." The host thought for a moment and then asked, "Why do you think he did that?" Keanu stared off, thinking. "I think he knew what it felt like to be ignored. Maybe he saw something in me." He paused and then said, "He chose to help instead of walk away." The host leaned in and said, "What if I told you that during that same year your teacher was going through something really sad?" Keanu blinked. "What do you mean?" The host explained, "He lost someone close to him, someone he loved. He could have shut his heart, but instead, he opened it to you." Keanu sat back, surprised. "I didn't know that," he whispered. The host nodded. "Real mentors don't always show their pain. They just make sure you make it through yours." Keanu's voice was shaky. "That makes everything he did even more special. He wasn't just teaching me, he was giving me something." There was a long silence in the room. Then the host added, "Sometimes the ones who help us are hurting too." Keanu closed his eyes for a moment. "He changed my life," he said softly, "and I never told him. Not once." The host looked at the paper in his hand, like he had something important to say. He paused for a moment, then said, "You might have a chance to say it now." Keanu looked confused. "What do you mean?" The host didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to look at the back row of the audience. "Some people come into our lives only once. But some people, they quietly wait until it's time to be seen again." The camera turned slowly to the last row of the audience. There was a figure, an older man sitting there, hands folded. We didn't know who he was, but he was just sitting there, watching. Keanu stared at him. His breath caught in his throat. He looked surprised, like he wasn't sure what he was feeling. Maybe he recognized him, or maybe he wasn't sure. The host let the moment hang in the air, letting everyone feel the silence. Keanu stayed still, looking at the man, not saying anything. There was a lot of meaning in that moment, more than words could explain. After a few moments, the host asked, "Keanu, you've often been called spiritual, quietly so. Has that always been a part of you?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He looked down and played with his sleeve. "I don't know if I'd call it spiritual, but I've always listened for things that aren't said. Even when I was a kid, I felt more comfortable in silence than in noise." The host listened carefully. "Sometimes silence says more than any words," Keanu added. "That teacher, he knew that too." The host nodded. "Was there a moment that stayed with you from all that?" Keanu's eyes softened, like he was thinking about something from a long time ago. "Yes, there was this one time. My sister had just come home from the hospital. She was really sick. I was scared, but I didn't want anyone to know. At school I couldn't focus. I was angry and didn't talk to anyone. Keanu paused, thinking. At the end of class, everyone left, but I stayed behind. I didn't even notice until the room was empty. My teacher came over to my desk. He didn't ask what was wrong or try to make me talk. He just gave me an envelope. No words, just a nod, and he walked out. The host asked gently, "What was in the envelope?" Keanu pulled out a small old piece of paper from his jacket. He held it up for everyone to see. "I've kept this up for all these years. It's a letter, a short one, that he wrote to me." Keanu cleared his throat and read the letter aloud in a soft voice, almost like he was remembering every word. Even silence has a sound. Keanu, listen to your soul before the world drowns it out. You're not lost, you're learning how to hear. The audience was so quiet you could feel the power of the words. Keanu held the letter close to his chest. That line helped me through tough times. When my sister almost died. When I didn't want to act anymore. It reminded me that silence doesn't mean nothing. It's sacred. The host looked at him, touched. "And you've kept that letter all these years?" Keanu nodded. "I've carried it with me since I was 17. I've moved to different places, changed jobs, had new relationships, but this letter stayed with me." He paused and said something unexpected. "Sometimes I didn't believe in myself, but I believed in the boy this letter was written to. That was enough to keep going." The audience stayed completely still, listening to every word. Then the host said, "Keanu, we received something earlier today. At first, we didn't know what it meant, but now I think you'll want to see it." He took an envelope from his table and handed it to Keanu. The envelope looked old, with frayed edges and cream-colored paper. Keanu took one look at the handwriting and stopped. His eyes grew wide, not with surprise, but with recognition. This is the same," he whispered. "The paper, the way it's folded, even the ink. This is just like the one I kept." He stared at the envelope for a long time before slowly opening it. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper with the same delicate handwriting. Keanu read it aloud. "Your silence spoke louder than any applause. I've heard every word you never said." Keanu's eyes filled with tears. He looked up toward the back row of the audience where the man was still sitting. The man hadn't moved or said anything, but something had changed in the air. Keanu seemed to understand something at that moment. Maybe it was recognition, maybe it was hope. Whatever it was, it felt important. The chapter ended in silence. The memory, the teacher, and the quiet connection between them all felt like a story still being told. The host put his hand over his heart and said, "We don't always know who's listening, Keanu. But sometimes the people who taught us how to listen never stopped listening to us." Keanu's hands shook a little as he folded the letter. Then he said quietly, "If I could talk to him right now, I would say, thank you for seeing me, for hearing the things I couldn't say. Thank you for teaching me that being quiet doesn't mean I'm alone." The camera focused on Keanu's face and he looked at the empty seat in the back. The room became very quiet. No one moved or made a sound. There was a peaceful stillness in the air. It felt like the space between the past and the present, between a boy and the man he grew up to be, and between a teacher and the student he helped. Keanu still held the second letter in his hands. He hadn't let go of it since reading the last part. The letter said, "I've heard every word you never said." The host waited for a moment before asking, "Keanu, if that teacher were here today and could hear you now, what would you tell him?" Keanu took a deep breath. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed emotion. He said, "I would tell him he didn't just help me pass a class. He helped me stay alive. He helped me believe there was something inside me worth fighting for." The room was completely silent as the audience listened. Keanu went on, "Every movie I've made, every line I've said, every time I walked into a room where I felt like I didn't belong, I carried his voice with me. He told me I didn't need to be perfect, that just being here was enough. And sometimes that's what kept me going when nothing else could." The host looked at the back of the room and asked in a low voice, "Would you tell him that now?" Keanu looked toward the back row where the figure was sitting. He didn't speak for a long time, then said quietly, "If he could hear me now, I would say, you saved me. Without asking for thanks, you gave me something no one else ever did. You gave me me." The studio was silent again. The host turned to the audience and said, "Sometimes we go through life carrying gratitude that we never say. A thank you that stays unsaid for years. A debt that can't be measured by favors but by who we are." He paused and added, "Sometimes we get lucky enough to say it before it's too late." The lights in the studio shifted gently. The camera zoomed out to show the back row again. This time we could see more of the figure, an older man with white hair and shoulders that were slightly bent, as if carrying a quiet weight. His hands rested on his lap, and his eyes were watching, but he still didn't speak. His presence was clear. The host turned back to Keanu and asked, "If you could look into his eyes right now, what would you want him to see?" Keanu didn't blink. He answered, that he mattered, that he made a difference, that every quiet moment he spent believing in a lost kid created a ripple that reached farther than he'll ever know. Keanu folded the letter slowly with respect. He was the first person who made me feel seen. Truly seen. There was another pause. Then Keanu said, "And I never forgot him. Not for a second." The camera cut to the back row again. The audience turned to look too. People moved, trying to see the figure better. But the man didn't move or speak. His presence was strong though. The host closed his folder and asked one last question. "Keanu, if that teacher stood up now, what would you do?" Keanu didn't hesitate. He said, "I would walk to him, I would hug him, and I would say, every good part of me, every kind word I've ever said, every hand I've ever held, every time I've helped someone, all of that started with what you gave me. I just hope he knows that." Then, something small but important happened. The figure in the back row slowly put his hand on the armrest of his chair. Keanu noticed it and stopped breathing for a moment. No one said anything. Not the host, not the audience, and not Keanu. Because sometimes just being there is more powerful than words. The man in the back row, the one Keanu had spoken about with so much respect, stood up slowly. He moved with purpose step by step down the aisle. Keanu stood too. They looked at each other across the room like time had stopped and only this moment was left. The teacher walked toward Keanu and Keanu walked to meet him halfway. They didn't say anything. Then they hugged quietly, powerfully. When they pulled apart, Keanu's eyes were teary. The teacher's hands shook just a little, but he still looked steady. The host spoke up, "Sir, may we ask your name?" The man smiled gently and said, "Charles Whitmore. But to one young man here, I was just Mr. Lawson." Keanu sighed like he was letting go of something heavy. Mr. Lawson turned to him and said, "Keanu, you weren't just a student. You were my reminder that even in sadness and silence, there's a reason to keep going." The audience was silent, listening carefully. Mr. Lawson continued, "That year I lost my wife. I didn't think I could keep teaching. Everything in me wanted to give up. But then you walked into my class, quiet, hurt, but full of something no one else could see." Keanu blinked, surprised. "I never knew." "You didn't need to tell me," the teacher replied. "You gave me purpose again just by being there. Watching you try so hard to stay present even when it was difficult brought me back to life." Keanu swallowed hard. "I thought I was just trying to survive." "You were," Mr. Lawson said, "but by doing that, you helped someone else survive too." They both sat down together, side by side on the stage. The host asked Mr. Lawson, "What made you believe in Keanu so deeply?" Mr. Lawson turned to Keanu and said, "Because I saw something in you that I don't see often, true empathy. Not just talking about it, but living it. You didn't speak much in class, but I saw you stay after to help others. You listened when no one else did. You noticed things that most kids ignored. That wasn't just acting. That was who you really are." Keanu looked down at the floor, feeling overwhelmed. "I always felt invisible. And then Mr. Lawson looked at me like I mattered." Mr. Lawson smiled softly. "You did. And you still do." It was a tender moment, full of love and understanding. Then Keanu asked, "Why did you give me the lead role in that play when I could barely read?" The teacher smiled gently. "I wasn't looking for perfect lines," he said softly. "I was looking for the truth. And even back then, you showed more truth in your silence than most people do with words." The room became very quiet. Many people were crying. Keanu's voice started to shake. "I've wanted to thank you my whole life. I just didn't know how," he said. Mr. Lawson reached out and took Keanu's hand. "This moment is enough," he said kindly. Then Keanu asked one last question. "Why now? Why come here after all this time?" Mr. Lawson took a deep breath and looked at Keanu with soft eyes. "Because I have one last thing to give you. Something I've kept all these years." Keanu was confused. "What is it?" he asked. The teacher reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old envelope. It was faded and tied with a string. He handed it to Keanu. "This is yours and it always has been. I was just waiting for the right time to give it back to you." Keanu held the envelope carefully. His hands were shaking. The people in the room were all watching. They all knew that whatever was inside the envelope would tell Keanu something important about himself. Might even change everything. The room still felt warm from their special moment. Keanu stood next to Mr. Lawson, trying to think about all the memories rushing into his mind. The host, who was watching, broke the silence. "Mr. Lawson, when did you know Keanu was different?" The old teacher smiled with kind eyes. There was a moment. It was small and quiet, but I will never forget it. He looked at Keanu and asked, "Do you remember a boy in your class who had cerebral palsy?" Keanu nodded slowly. Yeah, he couldn't speak. Most of the kids ignored him. Mr. Lawson continued, "One day during a group project, I saw you sit next to him. You held the book for him, helped him point at the words, and whispered the lines to him. And when the other kids laughed, you didn't stop helping him." Keanu looked surprised. "You saw that?" he asked. Mr. Lawson nodded. "I saw everything. That day I knew you weren't just kind. You were light." The room became very quiet. "You didn't do it to get attention. You didn't even think anyone noticed, but that's what makes it real. The goodness no one sees is the truest kind." Keanu looked down, feeling deeply moved. "I always felt like I was just surviving. Back then, I didn't think I mattered." Mr. Lawson put a hand on his shoulder. "That's why I believed in you. Not because of your talent, but because of your heart." He paused for a moment and added, "You thought your silence was a weakness, but it was your strength. You didn't speak loudly, but you felt deeply. That's why people listen to you now." Keanu took a deep breath, thinking about what Mr. Lawson had said. "I always wondered if I had any real worth back then. You made me feel like I did." Mr. Lawson smiled. "You didn't have to become anything. You already were." Then, just when Keanu thought the moment was over, Mr. Lawson reached into his jacket. "There's something else I've kept," he said. "I always meant to give it to you, but I waited until you were ready." Mr. Lawson handed Keanu a small bundle, carefully wrapped in brown paper and tied with an old string. Keanu looked down at it, his hands shaking a little. "What is it?" he asked. Mr. Lawson's voice was soft. "It's the last piece of your past and maybe the truest part of who you are. I want you to open it before it's too late." Keanu nodded, his heart pounding. He knew whatever was inside would change the way he saw everything. He carefully held the bundle in his hands. The string was faded, and the paper felt soft with age, like it had been waiting for years to be opened. Mr. Lawson nodded silently as Keanu untied the knot. Inside, there was a single folded sheet of lined paper. Keanu recognized it right away. This is my essay," he whispered. "The first time I really tried." He unfolded the paper and read the title aloud. "When I grow up, I want to be someone who makes pain smaller." Keanu started reading the words aloud. "I want to be someone who understands people even when they can't say what hurts. I don't think I'll be famous, but I want to be kind. I want to be the kind of person who makes a room feel safer." Keanu looked up at Mr. Lawson, shocked. "You kept this?" he asked. Mr. Lawson smiled with misty eyes. "I kept it because I knew it wasn't just an assignment. It was who you already were." The room was completely silent, everyone listening carefully. "When I read this back then," Mr. Lawson said, "I saw someone who didn't want to be great. He wanted to be good. And that's rarer and more powerful." Keanu put a hand over his heart, feeling deeply moved. "I thought acting was all about pretending. But the truth is, I've just been trying to live up to this page ever since." Mr. Lawson nodded. "You've already surpassed it." Keanu turned to the audience and said, "Fame didn't shape me. This man did. With one quiet belief, spoken at the right time." He turned back to Mr. Lawson. "You saw me when I was invisible. And now the world sees you." The host stepped forward, clearly touched. "What made you keep all of this for so many years, Mr. Lawson?" he asked. Mr. Lawson's voice was gentle. "Because I knew one day he'd need to remember who he truly was." The audience stood up, not clapping but just honoring the moment. Then Keanu raised the microphone one last time. "If today you had the chance to thank the person who saved you in silence, would you do it?" he asked, looking around the room. Sometimes, one word spoken at the right time is worth more than a lifetime of success. If you like this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling adventures, mysteries, and unforgettable moments. Your support keeps these stories alive and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next video.